Judeo-Christian civilization brought such an incredible progress and growth. No other did it. Egyptian empire lasted for thousands of years, and life of the son was the same as life of his father and his grandfather. There was a minimal change. There was very little change in China and in India. And only our civilization gave us this acceleration. And from 12th century on, it was getting better and better. And it is not by coincidence, because I think that Judeo-Christian inspiration gave anthropological basis, because human being was recognized as God's son. So it was a great nobilization of our creativity, of our freedom, of our dignity. No other religion gave such an advantage to the human being. So to conclude my little speech to Mr. Gorbachev, which was maybe as long as this one now, I told him, if Soviet Union today is facing so many problems, technological, economical, social, maybe it is because it went too far away from Judeo-Christian roots of our civilization. This was my point to say I don't belong to his orientation. In fact, later on, everything has fallen apart. I met him a couple of times later. Obviously, he didn't remember me, but I asked my prime minister in Poland, who walked him around Old City after this meeting in 1987. And the only question that Gorbachev had was, and this filmmaker, is he a Jew because he doesn't look like one? It was because I spoke about the Judeo-Christian, what in Orthodox tradition is not a common expression. So, from one hand, achievements of our civilization are incredible, and I think today we tend to underestimate them, and that's a great mistake. I think it is almost criminal not to respect enormous progress we have done. We keep forgetting that in the past great majority was living miserable life, poverty, hunger, danger. It was, well, I cannot talk about cold weather because it's not your case, but it was my case in Northern Europe. People were starving, people were freezing, people were killed on the street, and this all is over, and is over only recently. Practically in 19th century, it all finished. And when we look back to Charles Dickens, to Émile Zola, we see the description of the tremendous sacrifice that previous generations have made to make our life so rich and so easy as it is now. And it gave us so much freedom, which can be measured. I don't talk straight about political freedom. I'm an ex-physicist. So for me, the more convincing measurement of human freedom is energy. How many calories we burn every day. How many calories I burned today because I've been flown from Warsaw. A ton of kerosene was burned to have me here. No Roman emperor could afford such a fast and comfortable travel. So we are really lucky, and I think we don't appreciate it enough. But from another hand, we talk about new barbarians. And I think this is very easy to define. New barbarians are our local people. It is an interior invasion, not from behind the Alps. We have no Germanic tribes. We have our own proletarians who are now getting to this society and creating a middle class universally. This is a great change, and Ortega y Gasset was writing about it, anticipating how far it will go. And of course, his assessment was very right, but very negative. I would like to see the positive aspect of it. It is, for the first time in the history of humanity, more than half or more than 50% of population of developed countries has now decent life. In the past, it was a slight minority that had decent life, and all the rest had miserable life. So we have to remember how much we have achieved. Our memory is very selective. Because look, what we remember, let us say, in the field of arts, because that's close to my heart. Look at time of Haydn or Mozart. They were writing marvelous music. It is one of the peaks of high culture. But for whom did they work? For a prince, for emperor, for a bishop. And their audience was probably smaller than my audience today. Probably 50 people in the salon, not more than that. It was enough. And let us make this silly remark. Think about the power of acquisition that prince, emperor, or pope had. He could have paid Mozart an enormous amount of money, and Mozart was rich. While at the same time, you had pop music. There was a pop music, popular music, and in some inns, in some common places, some people were singing and dancing, and they were collecting some peanuts, and they were poor, because the power of acquisition of the mass audience was minimal, and power of acquisition of upper class was enormous. And at the same time, taste and money went together. They were married. They happened to divorce in 20th century only. But up to 20th century, it would be inconceivable for a pope to be, or for a bishop, or for a prince to be ignorant in the matter of arts, or music, or painting, or literature. It would be inconceivable to be ignorant because it went with his status. I've just come across a survey of Danish sociologist of Indian origin, Surjit Bhalam, who defines middle class in a very approximate way, saying whoever is able to save something like 1/3 of the daily income for some purpose would be considered as a middle class. And according to this criterion, which is arbitrary, of course, you have today in the United Kingdom 72% of people who would be white-collar middle class. And at the same time in India, it is approaching to 20% nowadays. It seems to be that in China it's even more. But this is growing very fast. Now, if we look at this change today, what happened? The new barbarians means our new brothers who were promoted from misery to relative wealth. They got a very big power of acquisition. They can buy, they can pay, and they promote culture which is accessible to them, which is easy and pleasant, and we would call it still primitive, but it is a noticeable industry that is producing it. So definitely today's mass culture is far inferior to what high culture used to be, and at the same time old elites are losing the power of acquisition. The educated, cultivated people are enabled now to pay art on the level that they will require. So we need a state to subsidize high art. And with democracy and populism, it is slowly becoming more and more difficult. Look at opera, lyrical opera in Italy. It is relatively popular, more popular in Italy than in any other country of the world. However, out of the taxpayers' pocket, enormous amount of money is given to opera, and only very few can enjoy the seat in opera. So people are more and more rebellious. Why should we pay for it? If they are unable, opera lovers, to pay what the opera singers demand, and opera singers are less paid than pop singers today. So finally, this will be again a problem, and one more populist will say, finish with these subsidies, we don't need them. Well, it was a remark about the change which we all witness, but I would like to notice some other important factors in our development. Europe was developing in a way harmoniously in spite of all the wars we had, and I think only 20th century, based on reason, brought us to the real catastrophe. It was catastrophe of reason, two great ideologies that have been criminal ideologies which have been born on presumption that Nietzsche pronounced in 19th century, God is dead. Since God is dead, we have other gods, and we have Nationalsozialismus of Hitler and International Socialism of Lenin, and some other peripheric totalitarisms in Italy and Portugal and Spain. And this was definitely the biggest catastrophe of the process of development of Europe. And as in my country, I suffered it particularly much. Both totalitarisms left dramatic signs in our life. I know that this is something to regret and to ask, why did we fail? Why this subtle, evolved European culture brought us to such a catastrophe? Well, now let me talk a moment about a simple fact which I already mentioned, quality and quantity. When I see the society of developed countries today, including my own country that develops very fast, I see that the access to education is far bigger than ever in history, that the access to culture is much bigger than ever, also due to technology. People listen to the music, even excessively. I think they listen too much. They can read as much as they wish, and they read more than ever in the past. They read tabloids. Tabloids are regrettable papers, but they are read by people who never read any paper whatsoever. So maybe that's progress. Even tabloid is better than illiteracy. People watch idiotic television, but they learn something that they haven't known before when they were living in their village, isolated from the world and having knowledge limited to their very close circle. So with all these elements, the mass culture, the low culture, is a very positive effect and should be welcomed by people who were attached to the principal values, because you see that these values in maybe cheapest form are accessible to many. So this is a new factor, and people learn